Okay, thank you. We'll call the Finance Committee to order on July 1st. Alderwoman Finlayson is president. Alderman Payon will not be making the meeting. First order on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend the agenda to include the resolution on community grants.
Okay, do we know what that number is?
R39. 20.
Okay. I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of the agenda as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, next item on the agenda are two sets of meeting minutes. The first one is for June 3rd.
Technically, they're the same. So your meeting was on June 3rd, and what you did was suspend that meeting and continue it till the 4th.
Okay.
So they're technically both for June 3rd. Yeah.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes from the June 3rd, 4th meeting.
Second, any amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. All right. Good morning, City Manager.
Good morning.
Next item on the agenda. Pardon? Next item on the agenda is Charter Amendment CA 1-20. Let me get that folder. Charter Amendment. So this is to create a deputy manager position for resiliency and sustainability, and to delete. This one doesn't delete. The ordinance deletes. So this is to create a position of deputy manager for resilience and sustainability. There are several amendments to this that have been offered. I think I do have a couple of questions on some of the amendments, but do we want to have a discussion of the charter amendment notion itself?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from the city manager about the need for this position, as opposed to having deputies representing all of our significant departments. We seem to be singling this department out, and I have to ask what happens with public safety and planning and other departments. So, Mr. Gerald, could you help me to understand why this department is to be elevated above all the other departments?
Sure. Yeah, I would be happy to. So you'll remember the history of this this particular position and organization. It used to be part of a bigger department that included co-compliance and some other responsibilities, and that was disestablished, and it became an office of environmental policy at that time, with more limited responsibilities for environmental coordination, with some of the MS4 responsibilities. The non-project related MS4 responsibilities, some of the sustainability and resilience functions. And then there was a proposal to sort of drop back and reestablish a department similar to what we had before, with some of the same responsibilities. And so that was still sort of in the offing at the time when I became the city manager. My belief, because these issues, sustainability and resilience, are across all of the departments, some more than others, but certainly each department has some responsibilities for sustainability and resilience, that position could be more effective as at the city manager level instead of as a department or instead of continuing as an office. So that was my preference. I met extensively with the sponsor of the environmental department idea, and we discussed what this might look like and did a lot of fine tuning of the idea during those discussions, and ended up with what we have right now, which is a deputy city manager, wherein the 3-person Office of Environmental Policy would break up to some degree. 2 of them would come to the city manager's office, so it would be the director position as well as the environmental coordinator position. The arborist type position would move to planning and zoning, where there's already a lot of that type of work done with landscape architecture and tree protections. So that would bulk up the staff there. So this is truly, it's not a reclassification of any of the positions. It's really just a true reorganization that doesn't have any fiscal impact. It just moves the 3 people around. As far as why public safety and some of the other departments wouldn't become deputy chiefs, I can tell you from my experience in San Diego, where I was a deputy chief. Out there was a chief operating officer instead of a city manager, but I was a deputy chief operating officer. And that structure was formed just because of the sheer size of the staff. They have about 12,000 employees in San Diego. And that's a lot of responsibility for the city manager / chief operating officer to keep track of. So they established 6 deputy chief operating officers there, and each one had a number of departments. I had 5 departments. They were all public works related, but public works was so big out there that we had 5 separate departments to handle the public works. And I had over 1,900 employees within those 5 departments. I don't think we need that here. I think that the staff is small enough that it's manageable just through the departments that we have. I'm not sure what benefit would be gained by having a public safety deputy chief, because right now the police chief and the fire chief are completely empowered to manage those responsibilities. And again, a little bit different concept here, because what I want is somebody that looks over all of the departments and helps coordinate all the departments for just those 2 areas, resilience and sustainability. So that was my thought process for this, and why it's somewhat different than having a number of deputy chiefs who have a number of departments underneath them. Instead, it's just more of a focused deputy chief or deputy city manager. I'm still used to that old term, deputy city manager for those 2 areas.
Well, I guess my history goes a little further back than yours does, because I remember when we had a central services department. Then that department was divided, and we created the DNAP, Department of Neighborhood Environmental Programs. And then it became the whim of the administrations to change from that department and community pressure to eliminate DNAP. And I think you were here when that occurred.
Yeah.
And the staff was dispersed through Public Works and the Planning Department. And then the director of that department, who I contend was the target all along, was moved to the city manager's office, or I guess we had a city manager then, Mr. Andrews. And then her position was eliminated. And then here we come back again, redoing almost what was in place previously. And one of my major concerns is that this is about personality and not about the job. We had a well-working department, but there were folks that didn't like the players in the department and set out to eliminate those people, and thus the whole department. And now that we have people that are more accommodating to us, we're resurrecting the department, and to the point now of a deputy position. And I'm sure there's been some negotiations behind the scenes to get us there. Because I remember very clearly in I don't know whether it was a council committee meeting or a work session, when you, Mr. Gerald and Dr. Nash were both asked the questions about where these folks should best be served. And we got different answers then. And so I'm just still very concerned that we're manipulating our processes and your explanation sounds feasible, except for one piece of it that I'll speak to in a minute. But I would hate for us to bounce back and forth depending upon the whim of the political leadership at the time. I'm not sure that will serve anyone well. My other concern is the line of authority. Are we going to be seeking out a credentialed person for that position? Is that position going to have a line of authority over the other departments? I just heard you say that you needed somebody that would kind of check with the departments to make sure they're adhering to the MS4s, for example, or the MS4. Line of authority is a big issue, especially when we're talking about credentials or lack thereof. So how does that work?
Let me send an org chart to Kia right now, so that she can put that up on the screen. To Kia's, yeah, there.
Hi.
Okay, I'm sending this right now.
I thought I hit that. Can you send it to Julian?
So the reporting that I just sent to you, to Kia.
Okay, I'll forward it to Julian. Thank you.
So what I envision with the lines of authority is that the directors will still report as before directly to the city manager. There'll be a dotted line of authority with planning and zoning and public works, which are the main departments that handle sustainability, resilience, and environmental issues. The dotted line is very familiar to me as a military guy. It's not as familiar to others, but what it sort of implies is you have administrative control and you have operational control. Administrative control is through the solid line. The dotted line is more the operational, and I won't say control, but I'll say authority to work with those departments and to use the authority of the city manager's office to help further what the city manager's goals are and what the deputy city manager's goals are going to be. So hopefully Takia will get that in just a minute, so you'll be able to see what that's going to look like. Everything else is the same. There's no. Did you get that, Takia?
Yes, I did. I just sent it to Julian, and we're working on putting it up on the screen.
Okay. All right. So there's no reporting relationship with any of the public safety departments. There isn't for transportation or park and rec. There's a dotted line just for public works and for planning and zoning, since those are principal organizations. So if you look to the right side, you see city manager, the block there is what it has been and what it is now, assistant city manager, human resources, MIT. The deputy city manager will fall into that box, but just to show the reporting relationships that I envision, I broke that out and put it to the right so that there's those dotted line responsibilities. The solid line clearly is still with the city manager. So I'll do all the performance eval and provide direction day to day. But there'll be some authority to work for the deputy city manager with those two organizations. And I think that's the real advantage of this, because as a fellow department department director, that position does not have that type of authority right now. It's more of a collaborative instead of a dotted line like is shown here. So that's how I envision the organization being structured.
So you think that there's a need for a stronger line of authority, is what
I
I'm
think
hearing.
there's a need for a stronger voice for environmental resilience and sustainability in the city than what we have right now, either with a department or with an office like we have it now. So yes, to answer your question, I do think we need a stronger voice.
And as a department, you don't think that that voice is as loud and as significant as the police chief's voice or the fire chief's voice or the planning, and what concerns me are the planning and public works directors who are credentialed.
Yeah, no, I'm not in any way taking away their voice with this, not in any way. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose is that the environmental functions, the resilience and sustainability get a stronger voice, not to weaken other voices. And this isn't a zero-sum game. In my view, this is to allow those functions to have higher visibility and a stronger voice, not to detract from any others.
So Sheila, if I can inject, I'd like to follow along. I think I have concerns that are complementary to your concerns. First of all, in my early professional career, I worked for the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and its sister organization was the Census Bureau. And I believe it was President Nixon who inserted another layer between us. And it turned out to be kind of redundant and ridiculous. And I think it was to have more political appointee positions. But in any event, I'm not particularly interested in having a whole layer of people between the city manager and all the department heads. I think it's much better to have the department heads reporting directly to the city manager. My concerns, though, are this is not an alter ego. This isn't truly deputy city manager in that we wouldn't expect this person to be having any interaction with police or fire in David's absence, or if David needs to be doing two things at once, so he sends this deputy to do the other thing. This is kind of a hybrid situation. And the very title of this gives me pause because it feels to me like environment has disappeared. Now, I guess we're using resiliency and sustainability as some kinds of substitutes, but my problem with the current structure is not the structure itself. My problem with the current structure is that the Department of Environmental Matters has no sign-off authority. And for me, I'd be just as content to keep this organization the way it is, but give a sign-off authority line in any applications to the director of the Office of Environmental Policy. Having the policy department report to the city manager as opposed to the mayor, I think makes a lot of sense. But the very problem I had with the current arrangement is unaddressed by this new arrangement. There's still no sign-off powers for this person. And when I look at some of the tortured amendments on starting on page 3 and a little bit more on page 5, I still don't see how there's any sign-off power. It's sort of like this person can review what the various departments are. Well, does review mean if this person, this deputy, doesn't like what they're seeing, they can say, I don't think you're doing it right? And the planning director or the public works director would have to adhere to that, would be listening to that?
Yes.
Well,
I mean, I think the answer is yes, because I can tell you that I don't have those sign-off authorities either. But if I review something and present any issue that I may have with things, it's probably going to be corrected. And I think that the deputy city manager, and we certainly put in the scope of responsibilities that that position will review all of the larger projects and whatever size projects that they feel is appropriate to review. But I would expect them to do that just like I take a look at some of the bigger projects to make sure that I'm satisfied with what's happening. So I think the answer is yes, that they would have that authority to be able to review and to change if there's changes.
Well, see, I would feel more comfortable if you put that second clause in, because right now it's review. Yeah, I review it. I don't think you're handling stormwater management properly, but what does that mean? Does that mean that something gets changed, or does that mean that this deputy city manager has issued an opinion, a feeling that stormwater management could be better handled?
Yeah, well, I think it's a matter of collaboration when all those things come up, whether it's me or the deputy city manager. But I think in the end that I would not have a problem with putting review and approve, because I think that's an important function that's going to be strengthened with this. I think that position is reviewing, and I think it was in the past when the former director was there. There was that review authority, but I'd be fine with strengthening it even further to say review and approve. And again, the approval is through the collaboration and the discussion of what the issues are and getting it to the right spot. So both sides can approve it.
And I think that word collaboration is important. And as I understand things, even under the current circumstances, collaboration has been good. I hope that's the case, but certainly collaboration with dotted lines is a very important element there. I think it would be very interesting to try to come to an understanding. I remember very vividly when we were dealing with one of the projects, and Matt Waters came and testified in front of us, and he pointed out that we couldn't get any more stormwater management. There just wasn't any capability on the particular location. It was a redevelopment, and that made all the world of a difference. And so saying we can only require managing up to this certain level, and that was very helpful to me, and I think it's an example of collaboration. So I would very much be comforted by adding review and approve to this to make it stronger. I still am worried about, to me, this is a broader level of responsibility than just simply environment, because we're adding resiliency and sustainability, whatever in the world that word means. And it's been a very nebulous word to me for a long time. And I miss, it's when do we get, first time we see the word environment is at the very bottom of page 2, which I thought that's what this was really all about as it currently is established. Is it the intent that this legislation is making this position broader than the environment?
It is broader than the environment, yeah. Okay. So I think sustainability is slightly more broad than environment, but resilience certainly is, depending on how you define it and depending on, if you're looking at economic resilience, or if you're looking at the more environmental resilience or infrastructure resilience, there's a lot of aspects to resilience, but it's sort of an additional area that we're going to need a lot of help with, and we're going to need a lot more focus on in the years to come. We've definitely started doing that over these last few years, but so that was intentionally added because we need that ability to start addressing that whole aspect of what the city's businesses are and what the city's going to look like.
So I guess I have 2 additional comments, if I could, Sheila, quickly. One is I'd like to see these words resilience, sustainability, and environment in a definitional section somewhere in our code? But secondly, does this position have any relationship with the resiliency authority that we're yet to establish but are contemplating establishing?
Yeah, so the resilience authority is really going to be a resilience financing authority, and it's going to really address how do we pay for these projects. We still have to identify the projects, we still have to implement the projects, and they will be addressing how do we get the funds through that authority, and not on the city's bill, I guess, to do these projects. So there'll be some relationship there, because the identification of the projects will have to go, those projects identified will have to go to the Resilience Authority. We know the first one out of the box is going to be City Dock. Everybody that's been involved with the city and county Resilience Authority has agreed that the City Dock is going to be the first project addressed by, if that Resilience Authority is ever put in place. And then the county will start addressing some of their needs as well. But yeah, so that will be sort of the linkage. They won't be directly involved, the deputy city manager, with the financing, and nor would they probably be otherwise, because that's the finance director's role here. So the finance director's role is going to be taken more by the Resilience Financing Authority for these projects if it successfully is implemented.
But I guess that's still confusing to me. I'll just ask, if we ever do establish, and it seems to me like we ought to be doing this pretty quickly, if we are hoping to do the city dock in any kind of expeditious fashion, would there be any additional language in this charter amendment that would talk about any relationship between the deputy for resiliency and the Resiliency Financing Authority? I mean, it would seem like at a minimum, this deputy would be sitting in on discussions of resiliency financing.
Yeah, I would think so too, as would I. But yeah, I mean, we can certainly add that. Again, the relation, if you set that all aside and we never have a Resilience Financing Authority, it would be the same type of relationship that position would have with Jody, the finance director, to deal with how we're going to get financing for these projects. So maybe that needs to be addressed, since we're having a whole new paradigm in financing for these projects with the financing authority. But it would be that same type of a relationship, I think.
So even now we have the WHIP program, and that's several different projects, and it has all kinds of different financing, public financing, grant financing, private sector financing. Is there any relationship between this position and those programs?
Absolutely. So we typically refer to that to the MS4 program, because we have an MS4 permit that we have to meet. And so the environmental coordinator position that will come along with the deputy city manager positions, almost sole focus is on the MS4 permit. And again, there's a lot of aspects to it. You were mentioning the WHIP, which includes the water quality projects that we have to do, but there's a lot of other parts and pieces to that. There's the public education piece. There's the identification of locations where there's pollutants. It's IDDE. There's a lot of other aspects. So Public Works will be implementing those projects, but everything else will be under the MS4 permit requirements, will be under the deputy city manager position.
Okay. Is that going to be, I mean, right now, this charter amendment reads a lot like a position description, and I'm actually glad to see the city attorney on here. We've been having sort of a debate about how much should go into charter and code and how much should be elsewhere. What would the position description for the deputy city manager, would that be basically a replication of what's in here? Or I guess I'm asking, Mike, are we loading up our charter and code with things that really belong elsewhere, like in a position description?
I believe that for positions at this level, the code and the charter are an appropriate place for the position description to go. As such, you may call it something other than a position description and more like duties, which at high level is really what this amounts to. When it gets to the HR, it's a position description, and there may be other things you add to a position description. But the duties should be put in the code and the charter. And we, probably don't have to be as detailed with position description, with duties, but the general duties should be captured. Yeah.
All right. I guess I'd like to see the revised position description at some point, but Sheila, you had thank you, Mr. Lyles, Ms. City Attorney. Sheila, you were wanting to get in.
Well, yeah, because you touched on something that I had attempted to ask, and that has to do with credentials and oversight. You mentioned Matt Waters, and Matt's in Public Works, right?
Yeah.
And he's got certain credentials that gives him authority over water quality, let's just say. So is the deputy position going to oversee what Matt would determine based on his credentials? I'm still trying to figure out what the line of authority will be. Well,
sure. So again, the departments will report to the city manager. I happen to have credentials since I was a public works guy. I happen to have credentials that allow me to oversee functions like stormwater and other engineering functions. But most city managers don't, clearly. The other three that we've had have not had the same credentials that I have. I haven't had much different credentials. So the credentials for the deputy city manager position will be similar, but somewhat broader than what the credentials were for the Office of Environmental Policy or the old DNEP, because you want those same skill sets for environmental knowledge. And again, environmental is sort of a subset of this, but those are the ones that are credentialed, so those are easier to deal with. But you want those same sort of credentials that were required for that position, for this position, because of the focus on those areas, and not the broader functions that you want in a city manager, but really detailed knowledge of those particular areas. So yeah, those will be required.
do you understand my concern? And this is a concern that was raised by, as I said, you and Sally when we had that meeting many months ago, with someone having authority over those people who were certified and credentialed in those fields. So this is different because the reporting authority. So you remember what was going on there, what we were talking about. So the context of that discussion was for an environmental department where Matt Waters and others were being moved out of public works and moved out of reporting to people that have those credentials and being moved to an environmental department that potentially could be led by people that don't have those credentials. We're not talking about doing that at all. So Matt Waters is one of our stormwater engineers. We've got a whole group of engineers that are in the engineering group under Sam Bryce. That's not going to change at all. The reporting relationship will still be up through Sam to our new director and then to the city manager. So what we're allowing to happen here is additional oversight and additional coordination and collaboration from the deputy city manager. And instead of that position being an office, it will have more authority and have greater say in these things, but not a reporting relationship where it would supersede what we have today. So the final say would come from you as the city manager, not from a deputy who may not have the same.
If we get to that, then yeah, it would come to me. What I would always hope for is that it would always be worked out between the director, the department director, and the deputy city manager. If there's a conflict there, would be my foremost expectation, is that they work it out. They collaborate and work out any issues. If that was not possible, then it would certainly come to me. But I would hope. As I say, hope is not a strategy, but that would always be.
We hope the virus goes away. So, but
Well,
Sheila,
we have had some past experiences that we don't want to relive, and that is my concern.
Yeah, but I think you're really putting your finger on the pulse of it for me, Sheila, and that is, let's go back to that very issue. Remember, we did a resolution to change the stormwater requirements to up the ante. And we didn't want to do a hard code change because, just as Matt pointed out to us, some projects can't manage 100% of a 1-inch storm. There's just not that capability. Where I see this is Matt stays as he is now in Public Works. He has the engineering, the technical purview, and he can say this is designed to meet the requirements of the code, whatever they are. This person, whether it's under the current position or under this new position, would say, yes, but I think we can get more, and say that from the perspective of that would help us meet our MS4, if I'm using the right terminology, our silt and our phosphorus and so forth. If we could contain more of it on this site, that then is required absolutely by code. And then that would get into a whole debate about, well, at what additional cost? I mean, how much more are we asking this developer to pay to achieve that additional environmental saving? And so then that would hopefully be a whole colloquy that goes on with the city manager, but with all of the different departments, including this deputy city manager, that would say, well, to get that extra increment would cost $100,000. This is a $20 million project. That doesn't seem warranted. Or to get that additional increment would cost $100,000. And this is a $1 million project. That's 10% of additional cost, actually 12, if you do the math the right way. That's a huge new burden on the project. And so that seems like an unwarranted burden. And that's why we hire professionals to have those conversations. We can have an interest in it as the elected officials, but we don't have the qualifications to make that judgment. I'm looking for a situation where those kinds of debates can occur. I do like this notion of on page 3 adding and approve to the review section, but I want to stop right now, Sheila, and ask you, we do have a lot of amendments, and I do have some questions about the amendments, but what is your general attitude towards this charter amendment right now? Are you willing to move forward and look at the details of the amendments, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good move, because I've asked my so far.
Okay. I guess I'm going to turn to the city manager and the city attorney. And by the way, I see Rob has got his face here. I certainly welcome any input from you, Alderman Savage. Is this committee, are all committees now going to opine on the 8 amendments? Is that how this process is working? I mean, I do have comments, and some questions as much as comments, but how is this process envisioned to be working? Every committee will opine on all of the amendments and add some of their own?
Yeah, I'm not sure who you're asking that question of, but yeah, I think that each committee is going to review this. I guess my thought going into this meeting, because, we have rules and environmental matters tomorrow, we'll have probably an even more robust discussion of this. I thought you would focus more in on the financial implications
Well, I'd kind of like to do that because then we can defer the details of the amendments.
Right, because there's no fiscal impact of this. Everything stays the same. We're going to have to break it back out in the budget, and the finance director can talk about that. But there's no additional cost associated with this, and we are going to have a robust discussion tomorrow in the joint meeting, I'm sure.
Yes. So Sheila, what's your sense? How do you want to proceed?
Well, I'm trying to pull up the financial impact statement.
There isn't. It says there is none, just as David said.
Okay.
Since it's just moving the same level of the position levels aren't changing anywhere. It's just shifting where it resides in our budget.
Okay. Then I guess I'm prepared to begin to look at the amendments, Ross. Do you only
actually
that have financial impacts or?
So that's exactly, I mean, my sense is there is no financial impact. There are certainly philosophical and legislative discussions, but I'm perfectly comfortable to defer that to tomorrow's meeting and not even spend time getting into the amendments here. Certainly is more appropriate to do it under your committee tomorrow and Rob's with the joint meeting. So I guess I would be willing to entertain a motion that the Finance Committee finds that there's no financial impact from this charter amendment and defer any other actions to the other committees.
Well, you have to give me a minute because I'm trying to pull it up on my phone.
There are some amendments I would point out that don't make sense to me. But again, I think that's something we can iron out tomorrow. There's something where we strike goals, but I think it shouldn't be struck on page 3. And then we insert an "and" there. So I'm not sure that amendment is properly crafted yet. But again, I'm more than happy to defer that. I'm also happy to defer this notion of on page 3, where it has this review process. I am curious, it says, reviews select development process. That word select bothers me a little bit, but I'm wondering who's doing the selecting. Is it the deputy manager that is selecting it, or is it somebody else that's selecting it for the deputy manager to review? I'm wondering if that word select is even needed, or if
I'm not sure it's needed either. I think what it meant was they wouldn't necessarily review all of them. It would be the high profile ones, the large ones, the ones that may have potential significant environmental impacts. So that would be my view, and that's sort of the marching orders that I would give. But I'm not sure what better word to use because I don't think it would be all.
No, but isn't that really at the option of the deputy city manager? So I would argue, and I will tomorrow, that we drop that word select, and the deputy city manager can be the person that decides what projects are relevant for the attention of the deputy city manager. So it just would read reviews development projects to ensure. If the city manager decides to review one, that's the city manager's professional judgment and business. If the city manager decides not to review it, same thing holds. It's that person's professional judgment and opinion.
Yeah.
All right. So Sheila, have you had an opportunity to?
Yeah.
Do you have a taste for getting into the amendments?
Well, I mean, I thought you were asking for a motion that would simply say that there is no financial implication or impact of both CA 120 and O 2020.
Yeah, I think that's my sense for the Finance Committee, and that's why I asked at the beginning, not even sure why these are coming before Finance, but the appropriate answer to that, I believe, is there a financial impact, and do we agree with the financial impact? Since there is none, I don't think there's anything more for our committee's responsibility really with either of these the charter amendment or the ordinance.
Well, I do have one question as far as the financial implications are concerned. And that goes back to credentials for this position. And maybe it's an HR question. I'm trying to figure out how to ask it without it becoming a personal thing. The pay and benefits as
Sheila,
well, the pay and benefits not change.
Well, so to me, that would be why we need to see
That's
the
not your question. That's not your question, ma'am, respectfully.
From existing, it's not personal, but from what it is today. So what is my question?
I think your question is what are the requirements in the position description? And that's why I'd like to ask for tomorrow's joint meeting, we actually have the position description, because that's where the skills, knowledge, and abilities are set forth for this. And it doesn't mean that it could fit only one person or that one person could fit, but that will tell you, for example, your question, does this person have the ability to question the engineering acumen of someone in public works? I would say that's not necessarily a requirement. So this person wouldn't have to have an engineering degree, but this person would have to have the ability to question policy for the city, in that maybe we should ask more of this development than the strict basic minimum. You know, am I making myself clear? So it's in the position description where the requirements are that establish the pay level depending upon the knowledge, skills, ability, and level of experience that are required by the position descriptions, such as advanced degrees in such and such, so and so and so and so, X number of years of experience in the following areas, which usually the higher your pay level, the more stringent those requirements, or more robust those requirements are.
So does that mean that the fiscal impact note would change? Once we've heard from HR.
You mean like dropping it from an A20 to an A19 or an A18?
Yeah.
I mean,
and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking, is it, I don't know.
So what we've done is we've worked through, and we have a draft position description. We're happy to provide that so we can talk to it tomorrow. And we'll make sure that the HR director's in the meeting as well, so she can address that. But we certainly wouldn't expect the grade to drop with the new position description, because it's going to be a broader scope of responsibilities.
So did HR label it as a level 20?
Yes.
Or okay, along with all the other department heads?
Yes.
Okay.
And you would think that would be appropriate if the person is over with dotted lines. Some of the departments, you would like to think that that person should have the same kinds of requirements and commensurate pay for those positions as those positions. So, you know, roughly equivalent to the director for planning and zoning, and roughly equivalent to the director for public works. By the way, thank you, David, for the org chart. I thought that really helped make this more understandable.
Mm-hmm.
So, returning, is there a motion from the Finance Committee to indicate that there is no financial impact for either the charter amendment or the ordinance that is establishing?
I think I already made the motion.
Okay, I'll second it. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of that motion and recommendation to the city council? This is a motion recommending to the city council that the finance committee finds no financial impact of these two pieces of legislation. Are we ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. We're now moving on to 02320, which is the fee for bounce checks and insufficient funds. And this is...
Mr. Chair, we've heard from Jody, I think, on this piece of legislation. And I think I'm comfortable with her explanation of needing to charge this fee for electronic transactions.
I like the way you think.
Jody, is there anything else you need to add to that brief summary?
So there are three different things in this legislation. One is that fee. There is also a fee for checks that don't clear, payments that don't clear. There's an effort there that we have to try to go back to the person and collect another payment, that kind of thing. So we've set that at the amount that's allowed by the court system if you end up trying to collect this in a legal process. So we set it to $35, and it provides the authority to charge that fee. Then there's the fee that you referred to, and yes, we pay tens of thousands of dollars in credit card transaction fees every year. It astounds me how high they are, how high they end up to be, and we end up putting the bill for that. And then there is the other one. Oh yeah, making sure that we can collect late penalties on sewer charges as well as water charges, because the way the code was worded, we could only collect a penalty on the water charges. It's just not clear. So we wanted to add that language back in.
Would we recoup all of the cost of credit card transactions?
I hope so. We'll have to wait and see, because it's a per transaction charge. When we try to say we're recouping costs, we try to figure out when we're processing these transactions, how I determined the fee was try to estimate how much staff time and effort went into processing these types of fees, and then dividing that by the total number of transactions that we had during 1 year. So again, if there's more transactions, it might collect more than we anticipate. If there are fewer transactions, we wouldn't collect as much as we'd like. So we'll just have to evaluate that. I did the fee based on a one position equivalent of my cashiers, equal to the position cost for one cashier.
Mr. Chair, then I would make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation for 02320.
I will second that, but by way of discussion, since our colleague Alderman Gay isn't here, he did raise during the budget the notion that this fee might be pernicious for people who are trying to make ends meet, that are going paycheck to paycheck. Another way we could address this cost is to increase the level of fees for everybody to cover that cost. But I have the sense that part of the reason for this fee is to encourage people not to issue checks with insufficient funds and not to make phone payments where they can't cover it. If there's that deterrent aspect to it, then raising fees for everybody a little bit doesn't achieve that objective. So, but I did want to raise that concern that Duan raised when we were discussing this before. However, I do second your motion.
Well, may I ask Jody, speaking to those people who may have some hardship, would this legislation still allow the finance director to make to enter into agreements or make some exemptions or some special considerations for hardship cases?
The short-term answer to that is no. This is something that will be in place on the website where the payments will be paid. Most of them will be paid, or if somebody calls in over the phone, it's going to be something that's set there where you click, you're going to pay your bill, and it'll say there's going to be a $2 charge or whatever, $3 charge added to that transaction. And to try to, at that point, when you're connecting with the customer, you're not going to be able to determine hardships. Further, the code does not give the finance director any leeway in waiving any fee or changing the set policies for anything we do. So it's rather restrictive, and it's
I don't.
We might want to address in the future, but I don't have any authority to waive policies based on the circumstances. The only time that we do that is when we feel that we've done something in error on our end.
And I'm assuming you don't really want that authority because you would spend.
It's hard. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You have to try to figure out who you want to waive and based on which circumstances. So you have to really set some very intricate policies on what you may waive and what you may not waive. It's more difficult for us, yes, if we have to try to decide if we're going to waive something.
Okay. There was,
even if you were going to do like an income-based thing where, yes, this would be a hardship for this person, income-based, then you got to try to verify income. That's an extra step in the process. Yeah. I mean, they could still pay by check, by mail. We could do something about coming in person if you come in person, but we still have to pay that fee from the credit card company. You still get assessed that fee.
Well, let me ask. In years past, I remember going to the finance director representing some constituents who were having trouble with their water bill. Mm-hmm. And he was able to, I guess, put them on some sort of a payment plan.
We already have that provision that that they are allowed to enter into a payment plan, and we have certain types of payment plans. I mean, there's a set amount you have to put up front, and then you have to pay it, but you have to get it paid before your next bill is due.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So we do have those kind of policies in place for a payment plan, but not waiving something like, no, I'm sorry, you don't have to pay it because I believe your circumstances are extenuating.
And that's really not what I was talking about. It was more along the lines of a payment plan. Mm-hmm. So yes, we do have that option in the city if needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion on this? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. And Mr. Chair, I think this would speak to Alderman Gay's concern also.
I think you're right. And I'm not sure he was fully aware that we have that facility. I appreciate him raising the point. I think he's trying to be considerate of the broad spectrum of the constituents we have. And that's why I felt obligated to remind us that he had raised that issue.
So can I interject here? So his comment was based on that fee, or was it the NSF fee, the checks that don't clear?
I think it was just in general, if people are having a hard time making a payment, kind of concern. And we do have a program for that. They come make their case. Oftentimes I've represented people who got an exorbitantly high water bill. Turns out they had a leak that they didn't take care of. We had a former elected official that didn't fix the toilet that was leaking and had an exorbitantly high bill. And so we do come, and there are programs, and sometimes there's adjustments. We had someone that claimed their water bill was high because of the earthquake. So, there's all these oddities, and that's why we have elected officials, and we come and see whether there's any kind of adjustment.
To let you know that leakage policy that you can get your bill adjusted is written in the code as a one-time adjustment per property. which has also come to be an issue because it's a forever. You can have one adjustment in forever. And if you have a subsequent leak, we have no authority to do a second waiver. And some of those leakage bills are huge. So that's another thing we've had some pushback on, FYI.
All right, so we have one item left, which is the addition to the amendment of resolution, which I don't have, but I thought we sent it so that Julian could put it up on the screen for us.
Is this the community grants?
Correct.
I sent it to you, so you should have it. Let's see. I sent it.
Yeah, I'm looking now. The problem is I use my iPad for both the agenda and also email, so.
10:55 a.m.
Okay, here it is. Resolution 3920, community grants, therefore resolve. And then there's an attachment, right? Another that is the grants themselves. I could get back.
You know, I can't do both on my iPad. I don't know how you can.
Well, because I'm on the computer for the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. But I cannot get back to the email. Takia, do we have as an attachment the community grants themselves?
It's attached to the same email.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm trying to.
Both attachments are there.
There's two documents there. One's the list, one's the resolution.
Unfortunately, I am having a problem.
Do you need me to send it to you individually?
Well, yeah, because I can't seem to get out of this email and go back to the attachment. Oh, come on. If only we knew how to use the devices we've been given.
It's only been 12 years.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever had instructions on how to use an iPad? I never have. Let's see. There's but why can't I get back to the attachments?
Hit done and go out of it.
Well, I'm going to have to turn my iPad off, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Can Julian pull it up? Did you send it to Julian?
Yes.
Well,
He's working on pulling it up now.
Okay, so that's the resolution.
Right.
Yeah, I've got the resolution. I just can't get the community grant schedule.
I just resent it to you.
All right.
And there it is on the screen.
Okay. So, Sheila, I'm going to rely on you. Can we go to the last page, please, Julian? Is this the right schedule? The correct schedule, the one that was approved by the Finance Committee?
Yes.
Okay. And the bottom line is the correct bottom line, Jody, 429,700?
Yes.
Okay, and we're leaving the HACA number in at 80,000.
Correct.
Which may not all be spent, and if it isn't, then it would go to the bottom line, fall to the bottom line, right?
Yes. Remember that's offset. It's an expense that's offset by revenue recognition. It's really just an accounting entry.
Right. All right. So let's see. I'm comfortable recommending approval of this resolution to the City Council. Is that your motion, Sheila?
Yes.
I second that. Is there any further discussion? Jody, you're comfortable that this is the right schedule also?
Yes, and I had advised that next year we want to remember if the council is going to approve the detailed list of grants that we have, this is another appendix to the ordinance, to the budget ordinance.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The reason it kind of got overlooked this year because it wasn't really attached to anything, and nobody ever really discussed the detailed grants at the council level. So we want to make sure the council has seen the list and agrees with the list.
Well, we did have a discussion at some point, but I don't know when it was.
I think it was Finance Committee. I don't remember doing it during the council proceedings about the individual grants.
Yeah. We didn't discuss it during our marathon.
All right. So if there's no further discussion, all those that are in favor of recommending favorably to the council passage of R39 signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I was hoping that the members of the Finance Committee would be sponsors of the resolution.
Oh, I'm certainly happy to be. Okay. So I guess we can take that down, please, Julian. The next item on the agenda is general discussion, at which time we usually get an update from the finance director. If are things that we need to know, Jody, please.
This is the time when I usually tell you what we're busy with. We're very busy with our year-end procedures and trying to close out the transactions for 2020 and load up the budget and the other system things we have to change for July 1st. So the next couple weeks are very busy for us. And I will tell you that we'll be introducing a bond ordinance to you soon that would list all of the active capital projects and how many bonds we would like borrowing authority for those projects, so that later in the year when we want to sell bonds or bands, we will have the authority to do so and won't have to come back through another council process. So we did this last year right after the capital budget was passed. So we'll be getting that to you in the next couple weeks.
Okay.
May I ask, Jody, how much are you talking about needing?
So what we do is we list all of the projects and we add up all the bonds that are programmed for those projects, and then we subtract what we've already sold, and we subtract the amount of proceeds from old issues that have not yet been used. So it's a net number for all projects. We will never borrow that many because the projects don't move as quickly. It allows, it's like a ceiling as to the total amount we would need to borrow for all projects. What we would do later is report back to how much we're going to borrow in a bands or bonds transaction. It would be a lesser number. Last year, let me see if I can get that open for you.
While you're looking for that, we made a few changes that had to do with the Stanton Center. And
yeah,
what else?
Those would be updated in that list. They would be included and added to the bonds transactions for any projects that we added. It would be the updated FY21 capital budget.
Okay. I haven't asked this for a while, but I have to ask, open government. Where are we in loading that up?
So we have, we've got the workforce planning module fairly well implemented. We're going to have to get back to that. We are ready to give the budget book a try with the OpenGov, but we got one training recently on how to do that. And then we discovered that they didn't record that training. So now we have to do the training again. So we have a recording of how we need to manage that software, because our implementation hours have been almost depleted. And that product, the WDesk is what it's called. We're not going to have WDesk's help going forward. So we're going to try to do a budget book with that module. IT was using the module. I'm not going to be able to remember what they call it, to put the COVID-19 information onto the website. I think it's called Stories. It may be Stories that are currently being used to show you the COVID-19 information on the city's website. Ina in MIT was involved in that. So we're using that. That's the first attempt we've done with that piece. It's a fairly easy piece of the module to implement, but we're moving. It's slow.
Okay. All right. Well, as you know, I'm looking forward to receiving that. And
Well, when it's uploaded and when we know it reconciles to what we have in our budget, you would be able to get on and click in the software and take a look at some of the details.
okay, Sheila, go ahead.
May I ask a question of David, Director or City Manager Darrell, about COVID money and the, we haven't approved any expenditures that I recall. So where are we with those funds?
Yes, so you approved the appropriation of that money for FY20. So we're actively expending that money that you've appropriated, and we'll have to come back in FY21 to get an additional appropriation from the council for the additional expenditures. But
Can we get
a list?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A list.
There was a delay. Sorry.
A list of what?
A list of the expenditures.
Didn't we get the money divided in fiscal 20, as you said, City Manager? And
Yes.
and
that
then
was
we have
accompanied
money.
by a list.
Yeah,
Right.
and so did you want a list of the actual expenditures or an updated list of the plan? Because you'll get an updated list for FY21 of what that, and that's actually a larger share of the money for FY21, a list of the planned expenditures.
Well, in the budget book, the budget binder, we had tables for grants that were for fiscal 21. They didn't include any of these COVID monies.
Right.
So we need to get an update of that grant table, which I presume is a pretty significant, pretty hefty update.
What the mechanism we will use is we'll come to you with a supplemental appropriation request at your next meeting to establish the amount that we want to spend in 21. Not only for that, but for those other smaller pieces that went to the various departments. And we'll have to reappropriate the transportation piece as well for
Right.
21.
So is that what you were thinking of, Sheila?
Well, yes, but I don't recall that we saw the specifics for the 2020 expenditures.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we can provide that, but that will not be in a complete form for you to see for a couple weeks. I'm still working through what we've already spent. And we have some hazard bonuses that are going out, but we've been working to tweak that list too. And that is going to be a 2020 expense. We're going to accrue it back into 2020. So until we've nailed down who's going to get that and the total of that, I won't be able to give you a specific list for, like I said, a couple weeks.
But Jody, what we provided with the appropriation
That'd be plenty.
was a list of what we thought
Right.
expenditures for FY20.
Right. The
But that
list
was just
previously
for,
provided was an estimate of what we thought we were going to spend for each thing.
wasn't that just for the pass through from the county, the $2 million?
Yes, but at the
Two
same
of the,
time, we
4.2?
2 million of the 4.2, but that was a high estimate. We didn't think we were going to be able to spend all that, but we didn't want to have to forego buying something and not have enough appropriation for it. So we gave you a list with the $2 million and the things that we would use that for. But like I said, they were estimates. So if you want something actual, we won't have a transaction listing for you until later this month.
Okay.
And that's what I was asking for, the actuals.
Yeah.
And then I guess for 2021, we'll get the expected, but not the actual.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in where the community caring social worker position is located. Is that in
FY21? It'll be in FY21 because we didn't have time to hire that position in FY20, so it'll be in FY21.
Okay. I knew you had said that before, but I didn't know what, and maybe it's a question for Trish, where we are in that process. Okay. Thank you.
So, yes, City Manager.
So there's just a couple of things changing direction a little bit. So while the budget process is still fresh in our mind, I would like to propose and like to discuss this with you first before we move forward with it, but propose that we, at the next council work session, that we have sort of a lessons learned from the FY21 budget discussion. And I think it's valuable to have the whole council, not just the finance committee. But if we have room on the July council work session, I'd like to add that. And also I'd like to talk a little bit about, we told you all that we would provide updates bi-monthly on how the budget was going, how the revenues were looking, and how expenses were going. I'd like to talk about how we want to do that in FY21 as well. When we start that, probably in September at the first finance committee meeting, we would want to provide an update and then continue that every other month. I think that's appropriate probably for the finance committee, but we certainly could do that from time to time at a council work session as well for the full council. So I guess those are my ideas. Certainly would be interested in your thoughts about those as well.
Well, may I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
We have had discussions, at least Ross and I, and sometimes with Fred, about doing just what you said with lessons learned. But also, back in the day, we used to begin our budget process in the fall. And we began with a retreat with all the department heads, during which time department heads would present to the council so that the process, everybody could start to think about what was going to be presented, what the mayor's objectives were, what the council's objectives were, so that when the budget process actually came in January and February, we already had some ideas of what needed to be done. So I think we would like to go back to something similar to that. And it doesn't have to look like, we used to go to St. John's College, use their big conference room. Chris Nelson, who was the president at the time, would facilitate for us. And we would walk through each department, and each department would have an opportunity to kind of outline their objectives, where they are, what they see for the foreseeable future and the like. But it got us to thinking about the budget so that we're not crunched in the spring to try to come up with stuff or try to evaluate what we've been doing. It would be more of an ongoing process. Not that we want to do budget all year long, because that's painful, but to just keep us informed and to begin to think about things earlier than we are now.
So I
think that would be a great discussion at the work session as well, as we sort of set the table for what we're going to do for FY22, which may be a very challenging budget year. So I think that would be valuable.
And that's consistent with some discussions with Alderwoman Tierney. I would point out in the code, Title 6, that 604020, there is a requirement for an annual report from the Director of Finance to be made at a council meeting in October. That is actually, it seems to me, really a propitious time, because that's when we start really needing to gear up to think about the next fiscal year. My sense is we probably could do with 99% accuracy know what fiscal 22 is now, unless we're going to be making some programmatic changes, because it's pretty much locked in by all of our compensation agreements and the need for all of the supplies and maintenance and contracts for staff and so on. Probably revenue is also, unless we get some nasty surprises from the assessments, is probably pretty well known. And I think one of the things that is important, I think some of the newer members of the council don't quite understand how much the budget really is locked in. We're constrained. There's not a lot of discretion. It's very much at the margin. is more discretion in terms of the capital expenditures or the community grant expenditures than in the appropriation budget, either the general fund or any of the enterprise funds. But the other thing that I would like to discuss is going into Title 616. We have what for me is a very new appropriations process, and it is not described in code. And so we have the appropriations ordinance, we have appropriations fees. I think there's some things like the payment schedule that we're sort of handling more or less ad hoc, but I think should be a resolution. I think the community grant should be a resolution. So one of the things for my lessons learned is I'm looking at Title VI and thinking about amendments, and I see the city attorney's logo is up here, but I'm not sure he's here, but I'm trying to give fair warning to Mr. Lyles that I've been busy thinking about things, and that's one of the things that I think we need to think about, and amendments we need to make it clearer. I'm sure we'll have some discussions about whether that goes into the code or whether that goes into finance department procedures and so forth. But it is a process that I think needs some attention. I know I could not follow that rapid stream of amendments with the totality where it's referencing line numbers and where it's referencing addendas. I heard that the department directors didn't even have that before them, so they couldn't be following it. I think we need to have some rules about how amendments can be introduced at the last moment. I think that's a very unsatisfactory process. And so I'd like doing some rules about when amendments, a deadline for amendments, and when proposed amendments need to get out in advance to the council so that they'll have ability to look at this line by line and understand it. And I'm thinking of things along the lines of no amendments can be offered and voted on at the same meeting unless there's unanimous consent, which means all of us on the council have a responsibility, if we really have amendments we want to get in, that they be done in a timely fashion so we're not overwhelming the finance department and each other and the department heads with all of these complicated amendments. It is, I think, a much better process now to do this through the ordinance, the appropriations ordinance. And I think this year's ordinance was even better than ordinances of the past. And I like the addendums. But when we're making changes, that's a lot to trace through. And I think that it deserves giving us the time to be able to trace that through. So those are kinds of things that I'm thinking about in terms of lesson learned. And I have been writing this up, and it may actually be available in time for consideration at the work session. But certainly is a purview of the Finance Committee to have further discussions. We always promise ourselves after the budget, we're going to go back and fix all these things. And then we say, well, we'll do it in August. And then everybody goes away on vacation in August. And by that time, we're already back into the throes of the next budget. And well, we don't have time to do that because now we have to think about next year's budget. So fair warning, I guess, is I've been thinking, beware.
Well, I think you're in tune with what City Manager Gerald just said.
I think that's correct, and we have had discussions. So, all right, is there any other business for the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second that motion. We got it done before noon. That's unusual for us. All in favor of adjourning signify. Aye.
Aye, and it's because Fred's not here.
Yeah, I think we're going to blame him. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, David. And thank you, Mike and Takia and everybody else. Thank you. And thank you, Julian.